Welcome back to Sidewalk Skyline Podcast. My guest today is Timothy Meisenheimer. He's currently the Senior Manager of Chaplaincy Services at Ottawa Mission. And from 1999 until 2018, he was involved in Capital City Mission, and he was their executive director. And prior to that, he served as a pastor in various communities. So, Tim, I believe that you and I maybe first met when I had hosted a conference in Windsor called Beggar's Banquet. That was in 2001. And that conference featured Tony Campolo as a guest. It had Caedmon's Call and a host of workshop speakers and urban ministry tours in Windsor. And so, Tim, it's great to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So it's interesting. Your lifetime as an adult really has been a lifetime of ministry, and the larger chunk of that has been specifically urban and given to the city of Ottawa. So let's start with Capital City Mission, the mission that you really were a founder of. So back in 1999, did this just come out of thin air? Like what inspired you to begin a mission in Ottawa, and where were you at the time? And tell us that story.
Yeah, it was quite a trip. So I was in Ottawa pastoring, had a church that really believed in supporting a Christ-centered drop-in center on, right as close as we could be, right downtown to center of an area in the town where it was called Lower Town. Wasn't any existing drop-in center there. That said, it was probably a kilometer up the street to the Parliament Hill and just past King Edward for those that have ever visited. And so it was a largely poverty place, or when we did our study back then in postal codes in the Ottawa area, it had the lowest amount of income per capita address. And so we kind of strategically had that. Anyway, what happened was the gentleman that I was pastoring with and great friend decided to resign the church just as we were developing the idea of unveiling our vision. And when I had gone to that church in Ottawa, I was really, from when I was in Bible college, some names I'll mention today are like probably in a time machine for maybe people, or you'll never know who they are, but just to honor them, because I believe who I am is really a part of a lot of mentors and a lot of people. But there was a lady named Carol Surratt that was one of our teachers, and she developed this idea of like, in Ed Psych 5, of thinking about where you think you were going to go with your life and how you were going to, follow your calling. And at that time, before I was in Ottawa, before all that, I really knew that in my heart I wanted to be an urban missionary. I had some short-term experiences in northern Canada, up in Pickle Lake and north of that, and in the Hudson Bay, and loved the Indigenous people and loved that. I thought for sure that might end up. So what happens is I'm in Ottawa, the pastor leaves, and I'm like, okay, maybe we got to put that, maybe that was in the Lord's will. And so I'd never been a senior pastor. I had about 8 years of youth and outreach pastor, and I loved doing that. But I put my name available to be a pastor anywhere in Canada. And where I ended up being led by the Lord's hand, I really believe, is this place called Killam, Alberta. I was in Killam, Alberta for about a year and a half, loving the church and coaching baseball as a small community, coaching hockey, getting to make friends with the neighbors and the small community. And it was really a pretty amazing time. We had a great change in the culture of the church and its involvement in the community. And I thought, man, I'm probably going to do this for a long time. And, maybe this is urban missions for me, because it's a small community and I can really be an impact by the grace of God. And so I was just going along that path. And one day, a guy knocked on the parsonage door next to the church, and I was there all alone. And he said he wanted to talk to me. And so, he had a backpack and he looked like he had another bag, and he was just a hitchhiker and he just wanted to talk to me. And so pastors know often that happens, especially, everywhere. And usually people often are going to ask you for a little bit of help, and then you have a prayer with them. And so anyway, he said, let's go sit down in the church. So we went over next door, sat back to the pews of the church. And this gentleman went on to explain, his life. And I just listened. And then I listened, and it was kind of, like waiting for but can you help
for the ask? Yeah.
Waiting for the ask, right? And so what happened was I started asking him how I could help him. It was like, yeah. Anyway, so what happened was he said, listen, you have done everything I needed today. I just needed to talk to somebody and have somebody listen to me. Wow. So I went back. I said, please stay here. I went and made him a lunch, put a bunch of Subway coupons, free meals. I think I was, not in a place where I had a lot going on, but I probably put $20 or $40 in the bag. And he said, he brought it back. He said, you really don't do this. He had just told me about how he was trying to go back to the East Coast, and he'd gone to Calgary, and he'd gone in through this and gone in through that. And he has all these broken relationships. He wants to go make his life right. And it wasn't really a transforming experience for him as much as it was for me, because I went back to my study after he left, and I tried to get him to stay in a motel in town. I'm trying to, get him, don't leave, you're my friend. And anyway, he just got back on the side of the highway and he went away, but he didn't go away. He was to me the angel that called me back to Ottawa. And so we started to put in process a lot of prayer around that, discerning that. I had a friend that I'll talk about a little bit later, that was a lady that was doing street work in Ottawa. Thought maybe I'd just partner up with her, and we'd be a good fit. And anyway, within about 3 weeks, we resigned from the church. And we had nothing other than our vision and our hope that maybe because of the favor we'd have with some churches that we were involved with, because I was involved as a youth leader in the city and whatnot. And, we had a couple calls, and okay, Tim, tell us when you get back and we'll have a coffee, right? Rented the U-Haul, had the last Sunday. It was Father's Day, 1999. Tent mate, had a job to sell cars from, favor I had within a church. A guy gave me a job, started doing my street walks downtown Ottawa again, which I was doing before I left, and saw what was different over a couple of years I was gone. And so what happened was that was the context, and we just went as a faith ministry, and we got a building in we got a building in January 2000, and there was people that walked. I'll tell you, like, I was just thinking about this today. It's like you're never gonna walk on water unless you walk on the street first. And so when you walk on the street and you ask Jesus to show you himself, you will see him. If you walk on the street and you look for the need, you won't see him. If you ask him to, so really, that's how it started. And we were just like really, really blessed that gradually one church after another church. By that March day opening, I wasn't needing to work outside of the ministry. We had raised enough support to have a marginal amount of money to live. And that was all done with 4 children, all different ages, from 18 to 18 months old. And so God was just so faithful. So the actual launch was sort of like that. The first week we opened, March 6th, We had a 35 cup coffee maker, not even a microwave. We had sandwiches that we made ourselves from, buying eggs and stuff like that, and tuna. And the first week first day we had 6 people. By the end of the week, we had 30 people. In a month, we had about 60 people a day. And in 3 months, we had 140 people a day coming in. Our motto was a place to find friendship, a place to find help. And we were going to give away what God had given us. So that's how it went down.
It always amazes me in downtown city cores. That's often where you have street missions. But at the same time, you're always like across the street or blocks adjacent from extreme wealth and power. And yeah. So, but where was your hometown?
I grew up in Sudbury.
Yeah.
And I was there till I went to Bible college when I was 27.
When you lived in Sudbury, did you live in downtown Sudbury? Did you have a lot of exposure to poverty and kind of the street affiliated population, or was that something that you discovered later on?
I don't think no. I mean, Sudbury. Historically, my dad was raised above a bar in the one of the oldest bars on Durham Street near Elgin Street. I mean, but I mean, we were not in anywhere near a poverty area. It was a lot of wartime houses and small neighborhoods. Sudbury was never fancy, as most people will make fun of.
Yeah.
But it's very blue collar, union town. And miners and but people talk to their neighbors. I think that some of the impacts that came in Sudbury was when I was a prodigal for 10 years. I was far from God for 10 years. I didn't darken a door very often unless it was for somebody's funeral that was in my family or something. But a lot of things happened in those 10 years. But when it comes to how this happened for me, how the transformation came in my life, when I rededicated my life to the Lord, it was through a pastor that he came and stood on the side of the street where I was working, because it was in trucking, and my dad had a business around selling fruit right out of a stand, and our truck was parked right half on a sidewalk and half on all the time, tractor trailer, And this guy was new to that church, and he came like 3 times a week, and my dad had been far from God, like he was backslidden for he wasn't following the Lord for a long time, and he would just insult him and be derogatory about pastors. This guy just kept coming back, no matter what the joke was about or what it was, like how humiliation was going to happen. And I just observed him, and then I figured, like, man, like, this he's here because he loves me. So if it starts on the street, it's going to end on the street.
Yeah.
That's my heart. And on top of that, my mother was in 1942 left on Bloor Street with her 3 sisters by 2 alcoholic parents who, in time on, everybody had some recovery time. Not her father so much with my mom, but with my grandmother. And so my family, when you think about Sudbury, you don't think about street ministry, but that developed who my mother was in with the presence of the Lord. And so when we do talk about mentors, I was always being mentored through a spiritual mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of the mentors, some of the influencers in your life that really, I mean, that pastor at the truck on the street, that's one. But what about in terms of getting a sense of urban vision the sense that your place was to go to the streets. Who influenced that? Who are some of the people and some of the maybe authors or anyone that you would consider to be a strong influence?
Well, early on, it started with, it started with Matthew 25. It came by those people seeing Jesus. And I'm dyslexic. And so my learning.
You mean Matthew 52.
Yeah, exactly. But that part about, as you do unto the least of these, you do unto me, and those categories.
Yeah.
So what happened when that guy on the sidewalk, it was actually Bruce Martin. And actually. And so I just started going back to church and left my cigarettes up on the sun visor, this is going to work, but, but I actually didn't. I didn't smoke for a whole year. And but that said, that and everything back then, right? Holiness, you don't smoke. But anyway, what happened was he probably within 3 or 4 months, he was gone. And there was this other guy, and he was like not anybody that I ever thought I would become a friend with. And he's actually been like the biggest friend ever. And so he said to me, I was at church maybe for 3 weeks after, and he said, hey, why don't we read the book of Romans, and I'm like, okay. And then we'll get together once in a while. Okay. And so he's absent-minded. I was be calling him and saying, hey, you said you're going to get together, and he lived like 5 doors down the street from me. So eventually he got his stuff together, and we met a couple of times. And then he said, hey, you got a truck, I got to move somebody. So this story really has an importance in this, of how I saw something that was mentoring. He had the heart, and he was a young pastor, and he was zealous and all over the place, but not really. Theologically, he's very sound. But he said, so where are we going? So we go to the worst neighborhood in Sudbury, and there's this lady there, and she's with child. And so I'm kind of like asking questions like, okay, so yeah, where are we moving? It's just like, smelly situation, right? And she goes, well, I'm moving in this place because my boyfriend's going to get out of jail. And I go, okay, wow, okay, we're doing the real thing here. This is the gospel, and this is a pastor that asked me to do this, and he like he was doing it. And I didn't think pastors ever did anything. I had great pastoral mentors as a child, just watching them. David Maines, Homer Catlin. I learned to cry from David Maines. I learned what grace was about from Homer Catlin by osmosis, right? As a kid, and prayer. But that said, the next line was, okay, yeah. And she goes, you probably saw this story in the paper. My boyfriend on our wedding day, he attempted to murder somebody in a hotel. That guy was, the bartender at my wedding.
Wow.
That guy was the bartender at my wedding. In 3 months, these people are all standing at the front of the church in Sudbury. And I'm like, okay, prisoners, yeah, okay, we're going to be into that. Look at what God does. He changes people's lives. And I was young. I was young. I was 25, but I was young in my faith. And I was like, okay, so that's interesting. So anyway, just to rattle on, faster. People and books change our lives, and through the providence of God, God allows us to, I believe this in a big way. So I've already mentioned my mother and David Curry, Bruce Martin, not intentionally sitting down and saying, we're going to do this course on how to mentor you, just by bringing you along with them on the walk, right? And what they were doing in those moments and where they were going. And that's how I met them. And so it just my whole life has continued that way. So, I would say that, my mother, my pastor friends, and then I came to Ottawa, and I met a lady named Susan Brandt. And that's when I was pastoring here, but I met her, and she was, a foot washing nurse on the sidewalk, again, on the street, going into missions, washing feet, had just a huge heart, and she still does. She's out west now. And she's sort of gone the route I have, like where she did the, storefronts and the drop-ins and then the actual, and gone through a lot of stuff. But she's out in the West now, and just a beautiful lady. And we didn't work one-on-one together, but just her atmosphere of ever, knowing her and being around her and listening to the way she talked. When it comes to the hardcore, she's the one that really showed me what this is about.
Yeah.
And also, so those are the sort of the people. And then the rest of it's all my friends on the street. They've mentored me. They taught me acceptance. They've taught me so many things.
Yeah. Generosity.
Yeah. They're the most grateful. I wouldn't say that, like all human beings, what, people misunderstand this. They can be the greediest people too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, we all have our stuff. But when you just continue to love them, you get an opportunity to say, well, and be with them. And so I would really say when it comes to people, I have like dozens and dozens of people that have become closer than any family really I've ever had. Mm-hmm. And that's, not in any case, but it's sort of like just a transformation of our lives, that this has become family because we're orphans. Mm-hmm. And spiritually, we're all supposed to get into the same family. And so that just happens not intentionally. Through the books, I would really say that in decades of my life, when I sort of look through this, in decades, my life went through different things. But, early on, when I saw that prisoner that was my bartender at my wedding, and those things started happening, and the church in Sudbury was starting a drop-in center, and I got a little bit involved in that right at the beginning when they were opening it. And that's before and when I was in Bible college, very little bit of involved, but I just saw like, wow, church isn't a building. It's us. And like, let's get our feet out there where people are that need our love, right? That need God's love. So, I fell on George Mueller as my favorite in the history of guys who went out and started things. I mean, he wasn't a ultra faith prosperity gospel guy. He was actually the opposite. He was just ultra faith. He just trusted God for today, whatever they need. And if people, I'd really advise them to read a good history of George Mueller. But the biggest thing is to just trust God for whatever people will need, and pray and keep serving. And so that was a big influence because of the way my mother had lived, but also when I started reading books like that. So, really in the 80s, it was Mueller and those kind of historical figures. And then in the 90s, I fell into Yancey a lot. And he helped me to, to think not so much about having all the answers and saying I don't know a lot more, which is always the right answer on the street. I don't know, but I care. And can I pray with you? That's always the right answer. I mean, so. Unless if it's where I can get boots, you can get boots over at that mission, right? Or that place, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's don't answer a question, and that helped me develop a capital city mission theme, that we didn't ask questions that people didn't already have. We answered their questions. Comes from John chapter 4 with the woman at the well. He answered many of her questions before he gave her any questions. And so it's a dynamic that we use there. But anyway, Yancey helped me there. Henry Nouwen, of course, I spent the 2000s, like, just really helped me. I went through some really, really difficult times in all of my life in the early 2000s. And I needed a lot of healing from all kinds of things that I didn't realize. And they were problematic in my life and in the relationship and whatnot. And so Henry Nouwen really, really, came from like the empathy level and the mercy level. It really developed, perspective for me. And then the last 10 years has been Melody Beattie. and the language of letting go and beyond codependency. I kind of believe that everybody on the planet deals with codependency or doesn't deal with it. But I certainly had a lot of troubles in that area. And I started to work some recovery that way. And that kind of helped me too, to work on the recovery work around addictions with other people and myself. My addictions with drugs or alcohol were, sort of long, in many ways settled with transformation in my life, but I didn't realize it's still how much that's such an easy way to talk to people that are in need, that have suffered consequences of like decade after decade between family with addiction problems and whatnot. And then really in the last 6 to 7 years, it's been a focus on grief recovery, because it's just everywhere around us. Everything.
It's multiplied for sure. It's really intriguing to me, just the way that when we walk with God, it seems like the Bible talks about we receive an inheritance, and it's actually when we're at our neediest and most broken that we start to draw on our inheritance. It's like when you're broke, there's this fund sitting there that you can access, but if you don't have to access it, you think, well, no, I'll take care of myself. But those early 2000s, that was really the time of saying, what do I have to draw on? And I love how God works in us in those very difficult and painful times. And for those who survive those times, there's a soul wealth that we experience. So we talked a bit about your calling, that urban vision, that stuff that Jesus was doing in you. And then there's this sort of minutia of working and directing an organization, being the guy that has to oversee budgets and buildings and policy and some of that stuff, it can be a far cry from the heart that put you there. But it can also be something that we grow in, and God helps us to grow in. But I'm curious about the transition in 2018. You became the senior manager of chaplaincy services at Ottawa Mission. Now, just for comparative values, Capital City Mission was essentially started as a storefront in 1999, and then you transitioned to the Ottawa Mission. So I'm thinking it's like going from the storefront to the institution, and in terms of the size of the organization, the size of the budget, the dimensions of work. So talk to me a little bit about that, those tension points. Can compare the strength and the weakness of the two models, the little storefront and that capacity institution.
Well, first, Kevin, Capital City Mission, I would just to say this guy doesn't do administration. Okay, I pray, I trust, and I go do. That's who I am. Mm-hmm. I was so favored with all that stuff you're talking about, policies and all that stuff. I was so favored because of the relationship, primarily in a church that I pastored in here, that I had 3 engineers. And so basically I would say, You guys don't have the answer, all the whys and how to do this. And they literally did it.
Mm-hmm.
I was provided like a gift in those people. And there was another few people on that committee board. It became, obviously, to become a charity, I really sat in meetings, and like they wanted to know whether or not we were telling people about Jesus and loving them. That's all they wanted to know from me.
Yeah.
And so God blessed me. I really was blessed. So from the beginning, it was that way. And there's still board members that are on it like 24 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And not all of them. Some moved on. They stayed on as advisors to that Capital City Mission. So that part of it, that's how it went. I was able to focus on the ministry and the mission, and that was pretty much it. And by the grace of God, we were never late for rent payment, by the grace of God. And we always were able to run like appropriately. The difference in the two, and how this was not something I sought. I started doing in my other role over there as an ED. After about 10 years, I said, what people need is a street chaplain. And so nobody, basically, I didn't have to ask anybody. I just said, I'm going to become a street chaplain. I'd taken chaplaincy courses before. I'd taken concurrent disorder courses. I had, maybe 2,000 people that I knew on the street by name. Not like a detailed number, but I'm just saying, remember, I'm not a detailed guy. So lots of people, right? So what happened was I started this chaplaincy services at Capital City Mission. And that meant like in 2006, already in 2006, there was a year there. It was a really, really difficult year in the streets. And we had 60 people die on the streets in 2006. And I was already going through my own stuff, just kind of coming out of it. But then that happened, right? And so I really said, like, people need, and I searched out, what's a chapel? What's it actually mean, right? And I guess the core of it was to put a coat over somebody, to cover them over. Somehow we created a building out of that. But anyway, a chapel became a building. And so I thought, well, I don't need a lot of money to do that. I can just do that, right? I can go on the street and put a coat over somebody, and not like I'm going to do a fundraiser to get coats, actually the presence of the Lord. And so we just go sit beside them or talk to them and engage them in no fanfare or anything, just naturally, because they knew you by name. That was our motto. So very different than an institution. But what ended up happening is some of them started dying in the hospice at the big mission. And I love them. I love that hospice. I mean, this is where people get an opportunity to die with dignity. They get able to have very good care and everything. So what happened was I started going, I was in there a bit, and there was one gentleman named Mike, and he was in there about 2016. And I was, like, I'd been through, like, in rooms where you couldn't take any anesthesia or anything, and operations with them, the whole bit. Like, we walked through all kinds of stuff. And I did his memorial in the Ottawa Mission Chapel. And a couple of weeks later, they asked me to work part-time for them. And I thought, oh, this will be good. Like, I'll have an inside track to work at the hospice, like with people that are dying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And only in a short time after, they made another offer. And I'm like, well, maybe this is time to transition. So that's how that happened,
mm-hmm.
which is important to the rest of the detail. The detail really to be, an institution accommodates. Thank God they accommodate. That's what they do. They accommodate, like, so many wonderful things that we're blessed to have in this country for people. And so whatever it is, they accommodate, and they do. And that is their focus. In the capital city, in the Ottawa Mission, it just happens that in 1906, it was some Christian businessmen that started this mission for people that were getting off the train right across from almost, the Chateau Laurier. That's where the train station was. And they were walking down, and they're in the market, what people call the market now. And there was nowhere for them to sleep, and they were poor. And so they started sleeping there. And when they slept, it was like almost like William Booth's thing was soup, soap, and salvation. That's what it was. That's what a mission was then. It was just those things. Well, now we're 40 things. I mean, our tagline at our mission is more than a shelter, right? I mean, people can get, soon they'll have the ability, they can get their teeth done, they can get their glasses, all of their health needs. I mean, we have a clinic, all these things. So it accommodates wonderful human needs, and it does it with a respect and dignity for human life. So the Ottawa Mission is such a blessing for so many people. This particular mission has always kept a chapel, and not just a chapel. They've always wanted chaplains to work there right through. And so, not too many places, especially in I would say in a non-Catholic world, not that we are Catholic or non-Catholic, we're ecumenical chaplaincy services. So today, I have Deacon Chris is doing a liturgy of the word at 11:40, and then I do Monday and so many days myself. But when it's not COVID, like, I couldn't believe it when I got there, because I knew it had always happened. But like 40 to 60, 30 people, depends on the time of the month, come in and they sit down and they sing to live music. And that's almost the biggest thing that hit me, is that, ragtag looking church. And I'm like, this is heaven. Like, these people come to church, and they're all ages and all kinds of things going on in their life. And so we would do about 320 services a year, chapel services. And it's a unique chapel. It's an amazing thing that happened. And then we'd have a Sunday afternoon worship service on top of that. And we implemented a French service, which had never really happened, and brought, some other ecumenical followings of different chapels. So that's organism. That's not accommodating.
Right.
The way Timothy looks at it, that's bringing life. That's bringing grace. That's bringing acceptance. And as thankful we are for all the different institutions we have, I believe that what lacks in a lot of them is the ability to have some respect for that access. Right. And so finding a balance in that, the way I've done it, I'm an urban missionary. So whether you work there or whether you're, you're in the urban center. So I'm loving you, and the people that work with me now are our team that God's blessed me to have come along with me over the last few years, are just like, that's what we're doing. We're serving the community. We're serving the neighbors. We're serving, just in a spiritual way, washing feet any way we can to continue to share the light of the Lord. But, I tease the mission. I don't know that this will happen, but I mean, I'm ready to retire from there. I've said this for a few years, so I don't know when I'm ready to ever retire, but from anywhere. But an institution has clients. I have friends.
That's good.
I don't have clients, and I don't have files. You know what I mean? I don't have numbers. I have first names, and if I can remember those, and we can have some way of keeping in touch with people. And so, I mean, the opportunity now is that I'll do 25 to 30 memorials a year for people. Many of them are unmarked or unclaimed bodies. And we are able to, through our relationship with government and whatnot, able to claim them. There's all kinds of levels of stuff that I'm kind of doing, like stuff that I never would have had the opportunity to do if it wasn't for the accommodation of and the grace given me at the institution.
When Bruce Martin was on one of our podcasts where we were talking about urban churches, and I said to him in that episode, if I lived in Winnipeg, I would want you to be my pastor because, he's one of your mentors. And isn't it interesting that you beat with the same kind of heart? If I was in hospice as a patient in Ottawa, I'd want you to be my chaplain. There's something about the heart of Jesus that in every setting just makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am so enjoying this conversation with Timothy Meisenheimer. In fact, I really enjoy talking to all of our guests. Isn't it amazing how God inspires people to do great things in His name in cities all across Canada? We'll be back soon with part 2 of our interview with Timothy Meisenheimer. And as I'm sitting in my car right now at night and it's raining as I record this little tag for the end of the podcast, and thinking about how grateful I am for shelter. It's a November night and it's a cold rain, and I sit in a dry car, and after a little bit I'll be going home to a dry house with heat. And don't ever underestimate how blessed you are, and how Jesus is waiting on the streets. He is waiting in the mission. He is waiting under a bridge and on a bench somewhere for someone to love Him. He said in Matthew 25 that when we feed the hungry, when we clothe the naked, when we visit those who are sick, all of these things, Jesus says, when you do it to someone that is in the margins, you do it as if you were loving me. So I encourage you today, after listening to this podcast, to just look for the opportunities that you have today and tomorrow to love Jesus by reaching out to somebody. Well, until we come back for the rest of this interview, this is Sidewalk Skyline Podcast, and I'm Kevin Rogers.